Are you struggling with a past trauma that has you stuck? Maybe it was a nasty divorce or some kind of abuse, maybe a career or financial setback or an unexpected medical diagnosis or some kind of other tragedy. Well, this is part 3 in my series on post-traumatic spiritual growth. My goal is to help you understand the impact of trauma on your life and offer some hope on how to overcome it. Today, I want to give you a brief definition of post-traumatic spiritual growth, along with a few examples. But first, let me address the premise of post-traumatic spiritual growth. The question is, how can anything good come from something so bad, right? I mean, that's the dilemma. But think about this. Trauma can teach you something that a classroom never can. For example, if you've suffered abuse and are looking to recover, do you want a counselor who has overcome their abuse or a counselor who's only read about abuse and studied it in school? Well, the answer is obvious. You want someone who has experienced abuse. And why is that? Well, because they know something that others don't know. They have greater insight than the average person. And why is that? Well, because they've gone through the pain of abuse and come out the other side. They know the way of escape. So in a strange way, you could say that their abuse gave them a gift. It's a gift of wisdom. And they can use that gift to help others. A gift that they couldn't receive in any other way than through that pain. Now you have to be careful with that analogy because you don't want to ever justify or excuse something like abuse, right? But like I mentioned in a previous video, I never would have written a book helping people to recover from spiritual abuse if I hadn't first experienced spiritual abuse myself. Or another example is my sister. She had colon cancer that eventually took her life. Now many people let cancer ruin their last days on earth. They dwell on all their losses, which are many, of course. But my sister used her cancer to make the last years of her life the best years of her life. She knew her time was short, so instead of giving up on life, she contacted friends and family, long forgotten, renewed her relationships with them, and added so much to her life and the lives of these other people. She called cancer a gift because it made her last 7 years the best years of her life rather than just growing old and dying. And her friends called her an inspiration. You know, when I read the Bible, God is constantly helping people overcome their trauma. A classic story is about the young man by the name of Joseph. Maybe you've heard of him. He was rejected by his brothers and sold into slavery, and then falsely accused of rape and thrown into jail and forgotten. Until one day, he was elevated as leader in Egypt who saved the country from famine. You can read the story in the book of Genesis in the Bible, but my point is, if Joseph hadn't been sold into slavery, accused of rape, and thrown into jail, he would have never been in position to save the country. And as he famously told his brothers in the very end, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." That's in the book of Genesis. And of course, the greatest story of post-traumatic spiritual growth is the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. The Bible almost shouts that God wants us to believe in post-traumatic spiritual growth. God wants us to rise above our setbacks and use them to put us in a better place. You know, it's so easy to see trauma as something that defines you and leaves you with a permanent and open wound. Some people let their trauma become their new identity. They never move beyond it. In fact, they cling to it, always talking about it, and use it as an excuse for whatever they lack. I don't think that's fair. It's not fair to them, to their loved ones, or even to God. God wants to transform our trauma and use it for good in our lives. As Richard Rohr has said, if we don't transform our pain, we will transmit it to others. Now, I want to share with you 5 aspects of post-traumatic spiritual growth. First, post-traumatic spiritual growth can give you new appreciation for life. When people have lost much, they often have a greater appreciation for what remains. Second, post-traumatic spiritual growth can improve your relationships. People who have experienced trauma often have great compassion and empathy for the pain of others, which helps them make deep connection with other people. Plus, trauma itself often draws people to you and creates a new intimacy. Third, post-traumatic growth can give you personal strength. When you've survived a trauma, you might feel more capable of handling other challenges that come your way. Fourth, post-traumatic spiritual growth can bring new possibilities your way. Coming out of a season of trauma can give you new eyes to discover new interests or talents. You might make changes to your life that you haven't previously even considered. For example, my sister, she got involved in an organization called A Second Act that helps people discover a new life after cancer. I mean, they are all about post-traumatic growth. And fifth, post-traumatic spiritual growth can bring a spiritual change. When people reach the end of themselves, they often find a greater awareness of God. They realize that God is the one who sustains them and can open new doors of opportunity for them. All these were true with my sister. Her final years were powerful. She inspired so many people with her positive attitude, her new faith in God, and her work in encouraging other cancer survivors. What's so interesting to me is that these 5 aspects of post-traumatic growth are what most people are looking for in life, right? It's so ironic that these things are available, but they're available on the other side of trauma. You have to push past the pain to get the benefits. You have to lift up your head to look for these good things. And too often we are so consumed with what's wrong with our lives that we miss the good things that come our way. Trauma knocks the wind from you. It makes you want to give up, but God wants to breathe new life into you. Your life probably won't be the same as it was pre-trauma, but it can be good again in a new way if you're open to it. Erwin McManus is an author and pastor, and he says that our greatness is on the other side of our pain. Think about that. Rather than believing that your trauma has ruined your life, what if your trauma is the doorway to greatness? Meaning that God has something on the other side of your pain that couldn't happen any other way. Something that will give your life meaning in a way that you've never had before. The spiritual part of post-traumatic spiritual growth means that you look to God to make this change. On your own, you might feel defeated and grow discouraged because you know that you've been knocked down too far to get back up again. So your hope is that God will raise you up to overcome your trauma. And that's why it's important for you to go to God every day, tell him how you feel, and ask him to help you take one step closer to that new life that he has for you. It's not instantaneous, but it is possible. My prayer would be, God, I'm broken, but you can heal me, you can restore me, you can make my life good again and use me to help other broken people. When you see God using you to help other people, it's so rewarding. It fills you up and gives your life purpose. Well, I hope this helps give you some hope today. Maybe you know someone who needs to hear this as well, and you might share it with them or maybe post it on one of your social media sites. I'd appreciate it if you give this post a like and be sure to subscribe so you get the last video in this series. And if you want to know more about my 6 books and my coaching opportunities, you can go to my website at readingremy.com. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.